Hey everybody, thank you yet again for listening to another episode of Ordinary People Extraordinary Stories. We have a brand new subscriber by my man, Richie. Thank you very much, Richie. I appreciate your support. We also want to go ahead and thank Courtney as well as Tamsin and Aiden. Give you guys all a shout out for supporting the channel. If you guys are interested in also supporting the channel, feel free to click the link below in the description to our Patreon, where you will have access to additional episodes, extra episodes, and extra bits from the show that we don't put on our Spotify and our YouTube channels. Now, with that being said, I'm going to start talking, and you're going to start listening to the next episode. Here we go. 1, 2, 3,000. Oh, hello there. I didn't see you come in. I'm your host, Tristan, and thank you for tuning into another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. Forgive me, I was just, juicing my pecs, giving myself a little pec juice. Lately, I have taken a more serious approach to my health after recording my latest guest, Mr. Jim Laird. You see, Jim is not just a health-conscious man, but a mind-conscious one as well. After a close call with an almost surgery, Jim had to take stock of his life. Physically, he was as strong as an ox, but mentally, well, let's just say some slowing down did him some good. In today's episode, we get into some serious topics like performance-enhancing drugs, completely uprooting your life, and women in sports. Content warning. A discussion of trans people in sports is had in this episode. Not for very long, but opinions were made. Now, that being said, let's grab our protein shakes, stretch those hammies, and get ready, you macho men and women, for another ordinary person with an extraordinary story. Yeah, so I was gonna actually ask, like, kind of, how's the weather been for you? I mean, I know you moved to Nicaragua, but like you're somewhere
Yes,
else, right?
I'm in Panama right now till tomorrow.
It looks beautiful. I mean, I'm gonna see if we can get video.
It is. I'm in downtown Panama. You know, a lot of these hotels, even though it's downtown, they have gardens and pools and all that sort of thing as well. So, yeah, the weather's been interesting because being down here, this is actually the winter time. This is rainy season
Hmm.
all over Central America. So it's been an adjustment as far as that. But we're coming into the end of the rainy season. We'll be starting up, the summer season here soon. So
So I'm not, and I know it's probably has everything to do with the equator. So in the kind of fall
Mhm.
to winter time zones where normally it'd be cool everywhere else, there specifically it gets warm.
Well, it's warm all year. It's just it's not as it's a little more humid. It's just raining a little more. It's cloudier. It gets cooler, but it doesn't drop below like 80 degrees. Maybe at night every once in a while. But it depends on where you are. Like if you go to some of the mountain regions, it can cool off. If you go down to Ecuador, they have the Andes there and they've got snow. But generally speaking, in Nicaragua, it's warm throughout the entire country. You could go up into the mountains into like Esteli or Monte Galpa,
Okay.
and it'll be cooler. It'll be 75, 80 in the summer instead of 90, 90. But usually, if you live near the ocean, there's usually a breeze, so it just depends on where you live. It varies like the United States does or anywhere else.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like, I feel like majority of the time you get like the best weather, probably.
Yes, the
Like,
weather here in the is pretty damn good. I mean, it's bright and sunny all the time. In the wintertime where I am, I live next to a volcano. I live next to some mountains, so it can be it's not as sunny as it is on the beach, but I'm not complaining. Let's put it that way. Not that I don't like the winter. Like northern Canada, I grew up in northern Alberta,
okay.
which gets really cold. It gets, minus 40 Celsius. And just for those people that have never experienced like 40 below zero.
Yeah, not
Which
me.
40 below zero Fahrenheit is the same as Celsius. They match at that level.
That's crazy.
You can take a pot of boiling water outside and throw it in the air and it turns into snow
That's
instantly.
have you tried that
That's how
before?
cold it gets. But oh yeah. And getting my tongue stuck on frozen metal. Yeah.
Oh God.
Every kid, your dad always says, don't stick your tongue on frozen metal. What do you think the first thing you do is,
I
and
want
then
to
you're
try
like,
it, you know.
yeah, and then you rip half your tongue off. But it's Northern Canada wasn't bad. The winters weren't bad because it was bright and sunny. There wasn't a lot of sun, but at least there was sun as compared to like Kentucky, where I was for 20 years. The winters in Kentucky are god awful. It's like being in Seattle, but colder and more
Mhm.
rainy. And there's not much to do. Like in Canada, you can go cross country skiing, you can go snowmobiling, or Montana or Colorado. There's so many things, ice fishing. There's so many winter sports you can play.
But in Kentucky, it's
Kentucky,
like
oh, the whole
just
Ohio River Valley is like a giant armpit, and
I love
it
that.
just did. I just didn't feel it.
That's
It's like
so funny.
I don't want to spend the last half of my life in that area. So God bless that area, but just not for this guy.
Hey, I mean, and again, maybe we might get some video on this episode, but I mean, if you guys can see it though, it's just so damn green and beautiful there. I brought up the
Yeah.
weather because we're on the West Coast. That's where I am, and it's like my buddy's in San Diego. I'm in Portland, and for
Yeah.
some reason this week, it's like the summer's kind of coming again. It's like that nasty kind of heat where it's like cranking up. I think it was like a
Yeah.
hundred
Yeah.
something here, and oh man, it was. I mean, I could go to Panama. I think Panama, I could trade Panama weather. I think that'd be pretty nice, if I could
Yeah.
choose.
Well, yeah, and you just have to, you get used to the heat, and you seek shade in the afternoon, but in the mornings and the evenings, but I do all my work outside. I'm never indoors. All my podcasts, all my interviews, all my coaching calls are done outside on a patio or somewhere. So it's much easier to live an outdoor life here.
We actually, that's probably a good segue into the episode, though. I mean, because we're doing Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. We're back, and you don't know there's any difference because I've been releasing episodes consistently. But I'm going to snitch on myself. I have my new friend here by the name of Jim, where he is my kind of first new pod match guest. We're back on it and we're gonna get some new guests and single episodes. And you were quite the bite, Jim. I don't know kind of how people choose you though, but it's like at first you weren't I don't want to say you were intimidating, but you low key look intimidating. Like in like a oh man, like I don't want to fuck with that guy. Or if like I know like shit happens, like someone's like does something, I'm like, okay,
Sure.
look at each other. I'm like, he's got me. Like we're gonna do like the head. Like, I got you.
Sure. And there are advantages to being like that. One is most people don't mess with you. But the problem is the people that do mess with you are going to be a serious problem, and you're going to have to take some serious action.
Oh,
Luckily,
snap.
that hasn't happened to me very many times. But if you do attract trouble, it tends to be big trouble.
Oh, and I
So
can imagine, and that's kind of what we're going to share in the story. But yeah, Jim Laird here. So, I mean, what kind of really brought me was honestly was a YouTube channel. I mean, you consider yourself
sure.
more of a health and wellness coach. I mean, you kind
Yes.
of mentioned where you traveled, Alberta, Kentucky,
Mhm.
Nicaragua, now you're in Panama. So, from what I've seen of him, is that he's kind of had a certain lifestyle, which we'll get into in today's episode, but managed to almost a complete health change where
Yes.
it seems his mental health is beautiful, his physical health is beautiful, probably even spiritual health. We'll talk about that too. But it's just this man is making crazy. I don't want to say like it's too like dramatic or like it's anyone can do it, but he still was strong enough to take these decisions. And I mean, your life looks insane. I mean, I can't even imagine you think like, would this be my life so many years ago? I mean, it's cool.
If you'd have told me when I was in high school that I'd be living in Nicaragua and I'd be traveling all over the place, if you'd have told me when I was in high school that I'd be living in Kentucky, I'd have told you you were insane. So I've had a lot of different experiences. I've worked, in a 5-star hotel in Aspen. I've bounced in nightclubs. I've done high-end security work, bodyguard work. I've coached professional athletes. I'm very lucky. I've had a very well-rounded life.
But it didn't start that way, did it?
No, I mean, I was always kind of an athlete, I used sports to manage a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, a lot of trauma. It got to the point where I couldn't use that strategy anymore because I was just working too much. I was training too hard. I wasn't taking very good care of myself. And I ended up having, a very serious health complication. I developed ulcerative colitis. I changed my lifestyle. And then later on down the road, I developed another illness that was due to the fact that I just never spent any time outside. That basically made me change. What happened was I'd gotten over my colitis. I started managing my stress. I started sleeping better. I was a little smarter about my training.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was dating a young lady, and being in a gym all day, your feet kind of get sweaty. They're better than they were, but they're not. I'm not a foot model. Let's put it that way. And she was like, you really need to get a pedicure, for us to continue having some fun relations.
That's hilarious.
And being a dude, I'm like, well, yeah, sign me up. So I go get a pedicure, and then 5 or 6 days later, I'm in the ER preparing to get my right leg amputated because I got a staph infection from the pedicure. Luckily, they were able to get it under control with antibiotics, but that began like a 2-year journey of every several months having a reoccurring infection. But this time it wasn't like in my leg. It was kind of like you had the flu, but you didn't have any respiratory symptoms. And then you got this really high fever. And so this was happening multiple times a year, and it was always the same treatment, IV antibiotics. And then of course, every time you do a course of antibiotics, that infection, you can't get all of it. So whatever's left over gets a little stronger. I was at a seminar and I met a guy named Dr. Jack Cruz, who's a very controversial inflammatory figure. I got to be friends with him. He's a neurosurgeon, and got to know him. And I started talking to him about some of my issues with my health. And he was like, you do realize the sun runs your entire immune system, right? When's the last, like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, well, I get up at 5 a.m. I train people to 8 at night. I go outside, I wear sunglasses. I never get outside. And he's like, man, the sun runs your entire immune system. It runs your hormones. It runs your digestive system. Everything in your body is based on circadian rhythm and light.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, dude, I need to make some changes. So I fired all my morning clients so I could spend the whole morning outside, get the sunrise, even in the wintertime. And I changed the lighting in my gym. I added some red lights. I added some black, dark UV bulbs to make it a little more like sunlight. I opened the doors up. And ever since I started doing that, I haven't had really a recurring infection. I've had a couple of little hiccups, but they were minor. So my health improved dramatically. And then I started thinking to myself, like, oh man, like here I am. The majority of the people I'm working with are looking to improve their health. And they literally spend all day in an office. They're on their screen, they're on their phone, and then they come into my gym and get more indoor time. So I started using my gym as a platform to get people outside more and get them walking and get out in nature. And I just was like, I really feel like a hypocrite by having a gym that's an indoor gym. And I started looking at different places to open an outdoor gym. I looked at Florida. Then COVID hit, and I was like, some of the stuff that went on, and I just didn't want to be in Kentucky anymore. So after the gym opened up, I sold it. I moved to Florida. And then basically after spending some time in Florida, I got in a really bad car wreck. A guy rear-ended me. I had problems walking, had problems talking for a month or two.
Okay. Jeez.
I had partnered with a friend of mine who's a medical doctor named Dr. Leland Stillman. I'd actually met him at a Jack Cruz event. He's an MD, but he was doing integrative medicine, and he was into the circadian rhythm stuff too. And we started collaborating together and started doing some things. And I brought basically coaching into the medical lifestyle change into the medical practice, and that worked out really well. So we have a coaching program now at Stillman Wellness. So basically I help people change their lifestyle. I help give them step-by-step advice on where to start and how to get themselves going in the right direction. And so that's what I do now. And I decided, after being in Florida for a while, I was like, well, I'm gonna head down to Nicaragua. I had a place picked out that I was going to build a gym at, outdoor gym, because I love training people. I love being in the gym, but I don't want to be indoors while I'm doing it. It kind of fell through. It just wasn't a good fit. So now I'm kind of on the lookout for another location. But eventually I'm going to build an outdoor gym somewhere down here in Central America for me to play around in. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Heck yeah. Okay. I mean, and there's so much even stuff that you touched on though. I mean, one thing I wanted to ask is that figure you mentioned about the controversialness. I mean, like why exactly is he considered controversial? I don't think I know that gentleman.
Well, he's very Jack is a I like Jack. He's a good dude. A lot of people will say we have similar personalities.
Hmm.
He's very I'm not as abrupt and as Jack will say very inflammatory things on purpose.
Okay.
So, he's really the one that's really brought him, and T.S. Wiley was the lady that wrote Lights Out. They were really the ones that beat the drum on like how important light and dark and making sure during the day you're getting natural light and at night, you're not getting fake light screens, things like that. But he says crazy things, that may have an element of truth to them, but he is who he is. And I think in every space there needs to be kind of that Baptist preacher, the fire and brimstone kind of guy, and that's who he is.
Hmm.
And so he's not afraid to speak his mind. He's not afraid to shake ruffle feathers up. He's actually in El Salvador right now. He moved to El Salvador, and he's helping the government there kind of revamp their constitution. And so he's doing a lot of great stuff. It's just a lot of people take him kind of the wrong way, or he has a different delivery style than I do. But I appreciate. I tend to meet people where they're at and help them in the situation
Absolutely.
that they're in. So
There's and man, we kind of really went straight through your story, like just like that. I mean,
yeah,
I'm
well,
thinking
let's
even
we can unpack it. I thought I'd give you a little overview, and I'm happy to go into any kind of details you'd want me to go into.
no, absolutely. And what I'm thinking we can start with would be a really good idea would be, I think, let me just bring up story here. I mean, you mentioned I think the pain, that hurt when you're
Yeah,
kind of growing
sure.
up. I mean, not to
Mhm.
just be like, hey, tell me all your issues, but I mean, like, what was it like growing up for Jim? And I want to ask, are you Canadian? Like, are you?
Yes,
Because
yeah, I'm
okay, all
Canadian.
right,
I was born in Red Lake, Ontario,
okay.
which is near Dryden, Lake of the Woods. Red Lake was a gold mining town, and then moved to Winnipeg, Manitoba,
Hmm.
and then moved to Edmonton, Alberta. I grew up in like a upper middle class family. Just it wasn't a great environment. We'll leave it at that. Just was not healthy. Did not get the nurturing that I needed, and a lot of responsibilities were thrust onto me that most children
Hmm. It's
shouldn't
unfortunate.
or do not need to get that kind of reality thrown at them at a young age. And so, I moved out of my house when I was like 14 years old. I had a lot of resentment and anger from my childhood. And, that some of the people in my life, recognized that I was acting out in school and that, but instead of them kind of trying to get to the root of why I was acting out in school, they just said, well, this kid's really aggressive. Let's give him an outlet. Let's put him in hockey. Let's put him in wrestling. Let's put him in football. And, of course, I knocked the crap out of people.
Let's let him hit people. That's what needs. Yeah.
I mean, I basically, and then of course they clap and, like a lot of boxers and combat athletes kind of fall into the same. They've got this like past that they're managing through their sport, which a lot of high level athletes are like that, which is totally fine. But eventually one day you can't manage that hatred, that anger through competition or through competing in a certain sport.
Or you just take it with you, probably.
Yeah, well, your body, like my body just ran out of checks. Like I couldn't write any more checks. Like I was, like a week before I like had a really bad episode of colitis. I literally set a huge bench PR, so I was pushing my body to some pretty extreme limits. It's just that I wasn't doing the self-care, and I used working out in the weight room to manage my hate and my anger, which
Mhm.
is great because it kept me out of prison. But without that outlet, I probably would have ended up in jail. So, I had to learn how to forgive some people. That was part of my healing process from colitis. Emotional health and stress plays a big role in autoimmune diseases. And a lot of people that have autoimmune issues have some sort of big trauma that they haven't dealt with. And I just kind of pushed it into the closet and just medicated myself with training and with aggression.
Well, I
And
mean, what was it?
not that I
Just
was
the
aggressive towards people, it was aggressive in the sport of play.
right. Well, I mean, and you just wondering. I mean, again, we don't have to get into if you don't want to. Be like, what
Yeah.
kind of abuse are we talking about? I mean, like, what was going on?
I don't particularly want to say that the people that participated in that are still alive, and I don't want to.
Oh no, no, that's fair. Okay,
But it was emotionally, mentally, physically exhausting and traumatic. I'll leave it at that.
I think that's beautifully said, and that's just fortunate. That's really really unfortunate. Just because I mean, I
It,
know
it,
you were
it
kind of talking
is,
about like
yeah,
it's how we had this conversation off the phone. I mean, that's the
yeah,
downside of
yeah,
people,
sure, sure.
but Yeah, let me take a step
It-
back because I wanted to
yeah.
touch up on something. So you were mentioning that I never thought of it before until you mentioned it about how
Mhm.
athletes kind of get encouraged, or like when, like you said, when you were hitting people in football, or when you were like,
Yeah.
oh hey, you were doing the thing though. They were like, I never considered, oh wow, yeah, people are encouraging, yeah, hit that guy harder. Do like
Mhm. Yeah.
it's almost encouraging, like I don't want to, it's encouraging the bad behavior, but in the good light of it, I
Well,
guess.
it's not necessarily a bad behavior. It's just I was using it to medicate myself, like an anorexic, like an anorexic with an exercise addiction.
Yeah, there
They're
you go.
destroying their health, they're destroying themselves, and they get clapped because, oh, fitness is so good for you, right? If I'd have been a drug addict or something like that, it would have been a totally different animal. But I was using something deemed as positive. I don't think there's anything wrong with combat sports. I don't think there's anything wrong with wrestling. I don't think I train tons of athletes. I still train hard. I've just learned how to train because I love myself, not because I'm insecure
There you
and
go.
because I'm trying to get validation from other people. That's the difference, right? And I'm actually able to relax and sit quietly now after years, decades of work on myself without dealing with some of the demons without having these voices in my head that I just couldn't handle because I wasn't able to sit quietly enough to actually experience the pain and process it and get them out of the system.
Exactly.
Um,
And you normally wouldn't have been doing that again, like I said, if it wasn't the fact that people were cheering you for it. So it's almost just like, hey, like
yeah,
I'm like, I need to keep doing this. I need to keep going. I need to
yeah,
keep
of
ignoring.
course, yeah, yeah,
So
and you just do and you just cope. And then one day I couldn't do it anymore because I'd beaten myself into the ground. And I just couldn't cope, and I had to learn how to sit quietly. I had to learn how to relax. I needed to learn how to go to sleep without just being physically. The only way I could sleep before was just be physically
exhausted.
exhausted
Just can't,
from
the
working
demons can't
working long
chase
hours.
you if you're too tired. It's just like the
that,
haunted
that, that,
memories can't
that that's
bother
correct. That's
can't
correct.
bother you if you
Yes,
physically can't stay awake. I'm sorry,
correct.
it's not funny laughing
No,
at
no, no, no,
that.
no. Absolutely not. It's I totally get it. And it's unfortunate, but it also has made me who I am. It's also made me to be highly empathetic for different people. It's made me be able to relate to a lot of people and to feel empathy and to see things in people that most people miss. The only disadvantage was I never really got to be a child, so that's something I've had to
Ooh.
deal with in the last decade for sure is, how do I relive, or at least develop that side of me that I've never let really out, you
Well, can I
know?
ask, what does that look like? You kind of developing that child, or are you still trying to figure that out?
Well, I think a lot of it is having empathy for myself, one, forgiving myself for what I did to myself. I built this massive tough guy shell, and the true side of me is kind of, you know, hidden away and was never really allowed to come out. So I had this facade that I was pushing on people for years, and it's still a part of me. But I think a lot of it is just understanding that I had some unfortunate circumstances. The people in my life were just doing what was done to them, and they did the best that they could, and so I was able to forgive them. But I also had to forgive myself, and then I also had to develop a relationship with this little guy inside of me who had been told his whole life he wasn't good enough, or he shouldn't be here,
Mm,
you're useless, you're horrible, you're all these things that were feed
all
into
the
me from
stuff.
from a young age. I had to come back and say, hey, look, that was essentially from people that just couldn't help themselves. That's not truly who you are. You do have value. You need to value yourself. You need to have, like, you know you have a purpose, you have value. And so a lot of the things I got myself into that got me in trouble were because I was trying to seek validation for the people. And that's where you get in trouble. Like when you start looking to others for your validation,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I didn't get that as a child. I didn't get validation from the one person in particular that should have validated me at a young age. Never did. So you start seeking that in other places, relationships that might not be healthy, activities that some of the extremes that I did in some of the strength sports, performance enhancing drugs.
Did you do any?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm very honest about that. I did
okay.
I did performance enhancing drugs. When I was done college football, I didn't want to do performance enhancing drugs because I got drug tested a lot. I was always been bigger and stronger than everyone else. I got drug tested a lot in college, but I waited till I was done with college football. And then when I started competing in powerlifting, it was kind of like part of the sport. And you just kind of, you went there, and I really liked it because obviously it allowed me to train harder. The big misconception with performance enhancing drugs is that it's for lazy people. It is not for lazy people. Yes, if you take steroids, you'll just gain some amount of muscle without, essentially doing work. But if you truly want to get the true upside of it, it allows you to overtrain. That's essentially why you take performance enhancing drugs. And then you have to have an incredible amount of restraint because it allows you to get your muscles to get stronger at a much faster rate. So you're actually very prone to injury. So you have to be very careful that you don't push too fast too soon. So I waited, and I had waited till I was a certain level of strength before I did performance enhancing drugs. A lot of people start off too early and then they end up really messing themselves up because they used, I used drugs. Well, I had trained for, well over 10 years before I touched anything. And then it made a huge difference. But you get addicted to that feeling of being powerful when you're on, super physiological doses of testosterone. It makes you feel like Superman, and it's really hard to walk away from that.
So, and forgive me if you told me this. So how long were you doing that for?
I did performance. I did super physiological doses of testosterone probably from the age of 25 until, and I was pretty smart about it. I wasn't like some of my friends that were crazy about it. I did that probably till I was like 38.
Okay. I mean, the fact that you, I'll ask, did it have any long-term health consequences because of it?
Well, I didn't, my organs are good. My health is overall good. I think a lot of it, well, it allowed me to drive myself further than I would have without it, especially with the lack of sleep and things like that. I was really smart about my use. I wasn't very smart about my lifestyle because I just, too many stimulants, too much caffeine, too many hours. But the negative really was going from being on super physiological doses to I tried to come off completely and that just didn't work. And then finding the right dose, the therapeutic dose that makes me feel good and making sure I don't get sucked back. Like that's why I don't compete anymore. I can't compete for fun. Like it's just not, it's not my idea of a good time. Like if I'm going to compete, I have to try to be one of the best. And so
And
I don't
the
make sure
best
I make
costs. And
that's why I don't go that route, because if I did go that route, I'd start, taking, excessive doses again. And I don't want to do that. I want to live, I've obviously, I think I've taken years off my life. I definitely want to live, I'm almost 50, and, I definitely want to live as long as I can.
And I want to make it clear, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
like guys, we're not advocating for performance enhancing drugs here, but he does look great. Like I like my man was very careful with it and he looks wonderful for it. So I mean,
Well, thank you. Well, I lifted for a very, very long time. So now my lifting is a little more athletic. I'm really, careful. I get lots of sleep. I get outside. I do all those things well. Plus, I have great genetics. Like I have genetics. My brother looks very similar to me. He's never done any performance enhancing drugs. My dad is just a ball of muscle.
that's the one thing you'd say your family, that the one good thing they gave to you is like all this
Yeah,
crap,
that's
but
true. Well,
damn good genetics.
I wish if I was a little bit taller, I probably would have went a little further in football, but
How tall are you?
I'm 5'10".
Hey,
If
you
I
know
was
what? That's,
Well,
just
not in
enough.
football. If you're not 6'2", there, if you're playing like a fullback or a tight end or something like that, you've got to be like 6'2". You can play some of the like smaller receiver, the slot receiver. You can be a little shorter. Being over 6 foot definitely helps in that department. But I honestly don't think, I'm glad that professional sports didn't work out, because I don't think I would have had the self-control or the discipline to um, control myself. Well, and the thing about performance enhancing drugs that you got to understand is if once you start them, they're very hard to stop,
Okay.
because you feel like Superman. You can do things in the gym that a normal person really can't do.
You a comic
They're
book
not.
guy? Like, do you know DC Universe?
Yeah. Like I
It's kind of
mean,
like Bane almost. It's like,
yeah.
again, he's
Well,
like this.
yeah. It's not gonna turn you. You've got to have good genetics in order to perform at the highest levels, but it makes a massive difference for people. And it's very hard to mentally, once you've been there and you've been that super strong guy, and it makes hard work fun. Like testosterone, high levels of testosterone make you want to work harder.
I like that.
That's why so many people, men in particular, are suffering today because their testosterone levels are so low. And testosterone is what actually makes you feel like you want to work.
Mm.
And so, but it also, when you take high amounts, you also have a really hard time relaxing and going to sleep. So
Right.
it's a double-edged sword, so to speak. And then, I tell kids all the time, if you are going to do it, wait as long as you can.
Absolutely.
Uh, I had a kid that was training with me back in my late 20s or early 30s, and he was 15 and he wanted to get steroids. And I told him, no, man, you got to wait. You got so much time ahead of you. And he started talking to some of the people behind the scenes, and he wanted me to get him some stuff. And I was like, dude, I'm not going to do that. And
Mm.
so he started talking behind the scenes to some other people. Word got back to me. He was looking for stuff. And I was like, okay, dude, I'll get you some steroids. So I went down to the bakery aisle in Kroger and I got some capsules and some sugar, and I made him about 120 sugar tablets. And I came back to him and said, hey, dude, this is the strongest anabolic there is, man. This is going to make you turn into a monster. But here's the trick. You got to sleep, 12 hours every night. You got
Yeah.
to train hard 3 days a week, and you got to eat a lot of food. Sure enough, within 2 or 3, he started taking these sugar pills. Within 2 or 3 weeks, he started getting a lot stronger. He was getting his rest. He was lifting hard. He was focused. And then I think I gave him like 3 months worth. He came back to me. He's like, man, I'm about to run out. Like, what am I going to do? And I was like, just go down to aisle 5 in Kroger and just go down and get the capsules and the sugar pills. Right. And he's like, what
You
do you mean? And
son of a
I was like,
bitch.
dude, you just ate a lot of, and most guys, like, instead of doing the hard work and eating more food and getting your sleep and consistently training, they jump right to the performance enhancing drugs. And so, I've helped a lot of kids not go down the path that I'm on because they'll actually listen to me because I've done them.
Right.
It's not some doctor saying, no, they don't work or they're dangerous. I mean, they are dangerous, but I've had friends of mine perform like steroids like you've never seen and ended up just fine. So I think it's overblown and overplayed. It's definitely not. I think the worst thing that happened to performance enhancing drugs is they were made illegal after Ben Johnson. Nobody really knew about performance enhancing drugs before, except the bodybuilders, the pro football players. If you made it to the NFL, somebody kind of pulled you aside and said, hey, dude, there's this stuff you can take that'll make you better. It'll help keep you healthy. But now, because of the publicity and making it illegal, all the kids know about it. So you got 15-year-old kids now running around on peptides, on all these different things, and they're taking these things, and they're starting at a much younger age, which I don't think is wise.
Well, so I mean, and I want to make challenge about making him illegal if that's really truly was the worst thing. But I mean, it.
Before, you could go to your doctor and you actually knew what you were getting.
Yeah,
Now
and they
you've
could
got kids.
regulate it.
I know kids. I know kids that took Winstrol and it ended up being Armor All, and they ended up dying from it.
Yeah. No, and that's
So
and you also seen all the like kind of controversial like muscle type dudes before, right? I think it's like
yeah,
I forgot who the latest one is. He's got like ginormous arms, he's got long
yeah,
black hair and baseball cap. I
yeah.
think he uses performance enhancing. I don't
Well,
know.
if you see anybody over 220 pounds that's relatively lean and muscular, the chances are they're on something. And the problem is the girls are doing it too. The
Oh God.
photoshopping on Instagram.
Well, yeah.
It's just we've set unrealistic expectations for people to look a certain way. And a lot of these bodybuilders are, before they used to have an off season where they could cycle off the drugs and eat more food and gain some weight. Now they're expecting them to be ripped year round. So they're doing growth hormone, they're doing thyroid, they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And it's really spun out of control.
It's like you said, it's putting that poison in your body and like kind of just running down your body now and to the point where you get to that older
Well,
age and you're just like,
everything is a poison at a certain dose, right? So, I mean, you're using things more or less that are produced in your body, but it's just at a certain dose, it starts to have negative side effects. If you're smart about it, you can mitigate a lot of those side effects. But most people, before, people could go to their doctor and they could basically have the doctor do blood work on them, get a prescription. Now you can't really do that anymore. So guys are going, they're ordering their stuff from China, or they're getting their advice from a gym bro. It's not necessarily ideal.
which is crazy when you think about it. It's just it's man, it's what time we live in. And you kind of, well, I guess the question I want to ask, so I mean, it's you've really we've been talking a lot about physical health and the kind of demands and the work you've had to do about it, but I mean, it really seems like
Yeah.
kind of as you got older, it's like you're realizing it's not just that's the most important, it's the mental health. I mean, when was that kind of
Yeah.
aha moment?
Well, that was when I got colitis, and I realized I needed to forgive some people, and I had a lot of hate. And then when I had my staph infection from the pedicure, and I realized that I was a human zoo animal, and that I needed to get outside more so that I could be healthy. Like those were like two biggies. And I tell people all the time, I never treated my clients. I always trained my clients very smart, even from the beginning. But I tell them, I tell people all the time, like if you want to live a long time and be healthy and look good, you want to be somewhere in the middle. Like you don't want to be like inactive, but you don't want to be a professional athlete. You want to
Right.
be somewhere in the middle, right? Because it's just like a car. Like you don't want to have like a Lada, which is like the old car from the Soviet Union, which is a piece of shit. And you don't like if you're a Bugatti, like it's very expensive. The maintenance is ridiculous. It breaks down a lot. You're gonna be looking at like $3,000 a tire, like or Ferraris or McLarens. They come with a cost, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a Camry or a Lexus or something like that, it's comfortable. The maintenance isn't that expensive. If you drive it like a reasonable person, you'll probably never have to take it to the shop to get anything done with the oil change. The same thing goes for humans at performance. If you want to live a long time, you want to be healthy, you want to flirt with performance, you don't want to marry it.
Yeah.
And the big thing is most people today just don't have what we call general physical preparedness because we don't do manual labor, we don't cut grass, kids don't play outside anymore. They don't have a base level of fitness to build on that their body can adapt in a positive way to stress. And so what happens is you got these kids, they sit in a desk all day, they don't play, and then they get thrown into a high level of sports, and then they get, the injury rates are through the ceiling. Their body isn't prepared for the stuff they're being put into, and then you end up with injuries, you end up with burnout. There's a few people that are genetically gifted enough to handle it, but those are just the top of the food chain. Everyone else basically gets, just get hurt and then next up, right?
Exactly. Just like, hey, we're doing it again. No, absolutely. So I mean, yeah, dude, and it is crazy because I mean, it's just like nowadays. I mean, it's the Instagram age where it's everyone's got to be a model. I always think about Fight Club though. It's like self-improvement's masturbation. Everyone wants to just like again be sexy, be new, be IKEA furniture. They just want like again, I want to be pretty. I want to be something. And
Right.
I like to
Well,
think
I
some
mean,
people are waking up to that where it's not
I
that
think I
bad,
think they I
hopefully.
think they are. I think I'm not an ultra religious person, but I think taking the fact that you have a purpose that I think the idea that we're just an accident, this big explosion happened and we just appeared here magically, has kind of really hurt things because people are like, well, this
What's my
world is all
purpose?
there is to it. I'm just going to get as much pleasure and partake in as much craziness as I can while I'm here because I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time, right? And so I think that's kind of hurt people because they don't really have the ability to, especially young kids, they don't have the ability to push. It's everything has to be instant gratification. We have to get better, and like we want to lose inches around our waist in 2 weeks instead of months. Instead of doing something that's sustainable over time, people are doing crazy things to lose weight or to
It's like
raise their
that
fitness
anabolic
level.
guy. He's like, I don't want to do the work. I want to do it quick. I want to do it fast. I want muscles. I
Yeah,
want, people want
yeah.
the shortcut.
Well, there's most of the people that do performance enhancing drugs are not using it as a shortcut. They're using it as an enhancement. Now there are people on the sidelines that aren't. Most people at a high level know that in order to compete, like your Tom Brady's, your high level athletes, they know it's going to be hours and hours of training. Like for example, somebody like Lance Armstrong is incredibly gifted, but the drugs he used actually help keep him healthy because anybody that would do the Tour de France drug free it is insane because it just destroys your body. So, it's not a black and white answer as far as, well, it's just you're cutting corners. It's like, okay, somebody that's a boxer that's been hitting his head the whole life, like when you play contact sports, one of the reasons I have to stay on testosterone is because I've had a lot of concussions. I've had a lot of head injuries through motorcycle accidents, car accidents, football, MMA, wrestling. When you've been hit in the head a lot, your body just can't produce the hormones that it used to.
Mm.
So these guys that are in combat sports or in football, they almost need to be on a hormone replacement just so they can continue to play their sport. And I think the number one argument that I hate for performance enhancing drugs that is bad for your health. Well, so is the 200-pound dudes running into each other head first is really bad for your health too. And then also, like if you're a Major League Baseball player and you're traveling, you're in a different hotel room every night, you're traveling all over the place, you're playing 200 games in a season, and you're so tired by the end of it, you're taking Ritalin and stimulants in order to continue to play. The sport itself is not good for your health, and they make the argument that don't do steroids because it's bad for your health, which in some cases therapeutic doses actually, guys like Junior Seau probably wouldn't have committed suicide if he didn't have the hormone levels of a 9-year-old boy, from all the head injuries that he's had. So it's not a clear cut good or bad situation.
Fair. No, that is fair. And I mean, well, okay, I guess that's what ultimately we want to find out, because I mean it's because again, I don't technically know about performance enhancing drugs and kind of getting there, but I mean, isn't the whole point people
Sure.
take them is because in theory you can hit a plateau as far as like I can only get
Yeah.
this big, I can only get these.
Correct. Yeah, it allows you to train harder. It allows you to adapt. And so what happens is when you train really hard, your body tends to down regulate hormones. So if you are a natural athlete, you actually have to be much smarter. When you're enhanced, you can get away with overtraining. You can get away with not resting as much because the drugs. Now, if you are really smart and you take your rest seriously and you do all these things, you won't have to take as many drugs. You'll take less drugs or you have less side effects. So it's a tool. If it was used properly, it's a great tool to enhance performance. And honestly, most of your world records and most of your sporting events today are being performed by people that are on performance enhancing drugs, maybe microdosing. But most of the world records have been set on drugs.
Hmm.
And Charlie Francis said it great, the great track coach. He asked Charlie, so what would happen if we cleaned up track and field? He's like, well, the same people would win, less people would watch. And so we have a culture that's demanding bigger, stronger athletes. Like if everyone in the NFL was 280 to like 230 pounds, do you think people would watch? Because that's the way that the offensive linemen back in the 50s and 60s were all around 200 pounds.
Right.
Now the average offensive lineman is 300 plus. So do consumers want to watch a bunch of average dudes run around on the field?
Not usually.
I mean, there are freaks out there. There's always going to be like Jim Brown and some of these dudes that, guys like Shannon Sharp, Bo Jackson was an absolute freak show. There are guys like that, but people want to see people break world records. People look at baseball when they had
this whole steroid scandal,
the steroid era. More people were watching baseball because they were hitting it out of the park. And the funny thing is after the steroid era, baseball was actually juicing the baseballs because they realized they needed more home runs for people to watch. So they actually were juicing the baseballs. They were putting a different kind of baseball that actually went further, and they would give certain teams that baseball and other teams they wouldn't. So there's a huge controversy with that. So it's a messy thing. And then you look at like Ben Johnson, the race he was in, the famous Canadian that tested positive for Winstrol. Every athlete in that race tested positive for something, including Carl Lewis, who finished second. He tested positive for amphetamines, not methamphetamine, but amphetamines.
Yeah.
The only guy that didn't test positive finished last, and they ignored all the other drug tests. But for whatever reason, they went after Ben Johnson. So it's a really weird deal. It's a wild political. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes with that?
And the crappy thing is, I mean, you kind of touched it. It's a complicated issue. It's like, so we got on one side, people who want to be the best are willing to put anything in their bodies. Now, again, you
Mhm.
keep saying if they're smart with it. Granted, some of them are, but I'm gonna kind of assume they're not. And like some
Mhm.
people like are just gonna get reckless, or they start out being smart, but then something happens where they're like, okay, I
Well,
need more. Let
well,
me.
it's just human nature, right? If 100 milligrams worked, what's 200 going to do? What's 300 going to do? And then if you aren't smart about cycling and having an off season, I mean, the Russians are incredibly smart. They basically compete, and then they come after they compete, they come off all the drugs, and they change their training. They take a year off, 6 months off, and then they're not at the same level. They have the mental discipline to do that, and then when they
Mhm.
go to compete again, they get back on the drugs, and you see a massive change in them. But they take the time off to allow their body to heal and recover. Most people can't handle mentally having that kind of drop in performance.
Well, the question I was going to ultimately ask though is that again, we got drugs on one side, people want to use them. It's like, hey, just make it
Mm-hmm.
happen. And the other side that are like, hey, we should regulate this. I mean, what is, I guess, the answer? Kind of like where we have this thing where it's like, again, if we regulate it too much, people are going doing it behind the scenes and, you
Right,
know, versus making it totally legal.
right.
And then that kind of becomes the standard almost.
Well, it's people are always going to look for an edge. They're always going to look for that way. They're going to work within the lines or going to gray the lines. Like for example, okay, so if you're an athlete and you're competing in an endurance sport, you can get a special chamber that costs a lot of money. So the U.S. spent tons of money on the Olympic Training Center in Colorado,
Mhm.
and then they figured out that what they did was actually not good. You don't want to train at altitude. You want to sleep at altitude, and you want to train at sea level
Why is that?
because it's at sea level you can perform at your highest level, right? That's why world records in sprinting generally happen at sea level. Generally, at lower altitudes, you can absorb more oxygen. What happens is your body adapts by creating more red blood cells. They created a shortcut on that, which is called EPO. So you could take the drug EPO, and you basically would raise your red blood cell count, so you'd have more endurance. Well, so if you're from a really rich country, you can buy a special tent that you sleep in that basically mimics that you're at altitude. So basically, you end up with more red blood cells. So is that cheating?
Mhm.
So the guy that's not doesn't have the money that lives in Africa or wherever else, he doesn't have the money for that tent. So like is living. It's just it's a really really weird dichotomy. People are going to try and find an edge, no matter what it's at. Whatever rules you set up, people are going to try and skirt them and bend them, and that's just kind of human nature. But I think allowing athletes to use therapeutic doses of things, particularly in contact sports, but then you got to come up with what it's really the weird thing that's really affected this is and this will probably get burned at the stake alive for talking about this, but what the hell?
No, I lay it on.
The transgender stuff has really messed things up because they're allowing higher levels of testosterone now in women's sports because of these transgender athletes coming over. They say your level has to be below a certain amount,
Mhm.
but it's raised the levels for what a normal female would have. So it's really encouraging a lot of these women to take testosterone. So it's wild. They've changed a lot of the requirements for hormone levels for men in the Olympics and in different sports. So it's wild. The
You
wild
know,
times we
and
live in.
you're not technically being controversial because I mean I mean again, you're not saying not necessarily trans athletes are bad. You're mainly just saying that because of these athletes now, it's like it's making that an almost a requirement, it seems.
I don't think trans athletes are bad. I just think that it's not fair to women. I think trans athletes should have their own division. I've trained women and men, for 30 plus years, and being a biological male has massive advantages over being a female. Like,
Mm.
for example, there's a lady named Becca Swanson. You can Google her and look her up, but she's, the strongest woman ever. And I think she's just juiced to the gills. Sweet lady, loved her to death. I used to compete in the same meet she competed in.
Mhm.
And, she's like 6'2", I think, like 275 at her biggest. And I think her deadlift was just under 700 pounds. And that's a woman juiced to the absolute gills.
Jeez.
Well, your average drug free guy that's an elite level power lifter pulls well over 700 pounds. So here's the top of the food chain with a woman on a ton of drugs, and they can't even beat what the average drug-free man can do. Look at Flojo, that still holds the world record in the 100-meter dash. She gets beat every year by at least 30 or 40 kids in the state of Florida in high school in the 100 meters.
Jeez.
So it's just, and in combat sports, you've seen like the women in the Olympics that were boxing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you take a biological man, even though he's gone through the chemical castration in that, he's still, if he's gone through puberty, he still has a huge advantage in structure and leverage, in power, in aerobic capacity, just bigger joints, bigger hands, taller. It's just not fair. And I mean, I've worked with female athletes my entire life, and I love watching women compete in sports, and it's just not fair. It's just not fair at all. And so it's unfortunate, and it's sad that it's controversial, because you called a bigot, you're called whatever else, but
you just can't have those conversations. That's a problem. It's like these need to kind of happen.
Yeah, I know. Somebody will light me on fire for expressing my opinion, but I don't think biological men have any. There's no room for biological men in women's sports. And unfortunately, that's going to make some people feel alienated. It's a hate crime and whatever else, but that's just a fact of reality. It's unfortunate, Title IX and all the things that have happened to basically get women's sports at a decent level of competition are now being just destroyed by this thing that's happening. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, no, and that's, and in a way, I'm actually glad again you said that. Like, I mean, I won't burn you at the stake. I'll stand by you. But
Thanks, you. I appreciate it. At this point, I'm totally prepared to be burned upside down at the stake. If I get burned upside down at the stake because I think there's a difference between men and women, burn me upside down at the stake. I'm not going to change my opinion on that. That's just a biological fact. And I will die on that hill if I have to. I don't want to, but I'm not going to shade away from expressing my opinion about protecting women and women's spaces and women's sports because it offends a very small minority of the population. You don't change a whole culture based on a few people. That's just not how it works. And when that happens in history, it never, ever, ever ends well.
Hot takes, people. Hot takes, but that's what we're here for. That's
You said nothing was off the table, so I don't know.
I know.
We just kind of went down that path, but it's really hot topic now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid to get canceled, or luckily there's a lot of great people like Riley Gaines and people like that, or they're standing up for the rights of women in sports and fair competition and
Well, and it's not necessarily like, I mean, the fact changing for the small minority, just the fact that it's becoming, even though it's a small minority, it's becoming a thing. And I mean, it essentially wasn't America always founded on like, hey, like we have room for everybody, like every immigrant, every, even transgender individuals.
There has to be some limits that are anchored in common sense. I mean, we can't have everybody from the third world move to the United States. We just don't have the resources to take care of them, right? We can't, if I wake up tomorrow and decide I want to compete in women's weightlifting, which a guy in Canada did to prove a point, there's plenty of people in New York and California that are men that on purpose identify as a woman, so they go to a women's prison instead of a men's prison. So feelings are good, but you got to have some facts. You got to have some things that are anchored in reality, so that you establish some rules that allow equal playing.
I think a good broad topic is you should just have a conversation. I think that's important, because I think when anybody generalizes everything, that's also part of the issue.
I agree, and I also think exposing children at a very young age to this stuff is not. Children don't have the ability to.
You just want to get me canceled. You got an opinion on?
I do.
Like Israel and Palestine. Like,
I do, but I won't get into that. But
God bless you.
I just think that children don't have the mental capacity to deal with some of these topics at that age, and it's just not. Our education system in the United States has been absolutely destroyed because they're not teaching educational things. They're not letting the kids play outside. Instead, they're worried about like putting tampons in the men's restroom. So it's a really wild time we live in.
I think it's even worse than that. I think it's just the fact that there's just the money that's supposed to be going into it's not going into it. There's a gajillion reasons
Well, we
why.
we spend more money than any country in the world on education, but we have one of the poorest outcomes. And part of the reason is that our education system is not designed to create independent free thinkers. It's designed to create obedient idiots. And
I agree with you there. Yeah.
they're trying to teach children to learn like adults, and children don't learn like adults. Children learn through, even adults movement is a big part of your brain development. That's one of the reasons you're seeing so many cognitive issues today, is because movement is a huge part of your brain development. And so you've got these kids, I was in line in a store in Kentucky, and I'm originally supposed to be an elementary school teacher, but I got out of it because I just saw that it wasn't going in a good direction.
Hmm.
And this lady's like, yeah, Kentucky's not very well rated in education. She's like, we're going to start teaching the children how to read in preschool. And it's like, that's not how children learn how to read. Children children learn through example, through play, through absorbing their environment. Children learn from their parents reading to them. They don't learn by sitting down and like rote learning at that age. They don't have the brain to do it yet. So the play-based learning should last till like third or fourth grade, like they do in Europe, or they do at the Montessori school, or they do at the Waldorf school, which guess what? Bill Gates and all these people that run the Silicon Valley, they put their kids in the Waldorf school. Those kids don't get screens, they don't get technology, they have play-based learning because they know that's what's best for the children. And then the public school, we're going to we're going to give them a tablet as soon as we can. No recess. I mean, maximum security prisoners today get more time outside than children do.
It's a crazy statement to even say out loud. That's nuts.
It's true. Look it up.
No, I believe you. I believe you.
Yeah. So children are not getting the things they need to be mentally healthy. We're telling boys to sit still for 8 hours. That's ridiculous. Boys are designed to run around and have fun and play. Girls too. But boys, because of testosterone, they need that outlet of energy. They need to be physically active. They need to be rough and roughhouse. That's just part of development. And we've taken that all away. And we wonder why kids are ridiculously struggling today with mental health, with having to be on all sorts of different medications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I'll reiterate what I said before. I think again, the most important thing that just needs to happen is that conversations need to be had. An honest conversation. It's like, hey, is this working?
Yeah.
Is
And
this
it needs to be based on numbers and facts and not feelings and like being accused of a racism or whatever if you just present facts. And that's the problem. People won't look at the facts. It's all how I feel, it's emotions.
No, absolutely. So again, I am happy you said it. We're keeping it, of course. It's just I gotta maybe we can switch to a little lighter topic. I mean, is
Yeah,
there
please
any
do.
that cool? All right. I
Yeah,
think
of course.
yeah.
No, you do whatever's best for your show. I'm just going to give my opinion and then you do whatever you want.
And I did say that. I did say that, and I need to back my words too. Just son of a bitch, you did you definitely did that. I was like, okay, we're gonna say your piece. I was like, holy fuck. Like
Yeah.
no, okay, so let's actually how much time have we been doing this for so far? It's about we
It's
started at
3:11. Yeah.
okay, so we did an hour so far. I think
I think
kind
so.
of
Yeah.
maybe about
Man,
30
it flew by.
right? I will ask, is this like the first time? Well, probably not the first time, but does that happen very rarely when you're like, oh man, like I didn't even notice, or is it, usually go by quick for you?
When I get in a flow and I start talking, I lose track of time.
I think I was just looking for a compliment, but no, that's cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
But you're a good interviewer too. You're asking good questions, and that, it helps to have somebody who, asks good questions and then lets me speak. And that definitely helps with the flow. But I speak for a living. So when I get on a roll and I get with somebody that allows me to speak, time just flies. So
No, absolutely. And like I said, you got the success and the results to show kind of like, hey, maybe there's some wisdom to this guy's words. And little side note, everybody, I do my show, it's my podcast, OPES Podcast, where we talk about hot topic issues, and I make my guests, I don't make my guests compliment me, but I do like it. So I think that's the whole reason I do this show is I just need that little ego stroke, a little
I understand. Well, you do a good job, and I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate flexibility. I like the fact that it's an open discussion. So there's your compliment.
Because that's what I'm about. Because I mean, again, it's like it's when things just get shut down, and
We're not going in a good direction.
no,
The
it's
answer
not.
the answer is never ever censorship. Free speech is for the speech people hate. It's not for the friendly fuzzy speech.
No, it's I remember I'm not I think it was John Adams who said it's like I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Like
That is absolutely correct.
I remember seeing that poster and I was like, fuck, that's deep. I was like 12 and I was like again just playing games and like just being a little fat kid and I saw that I was just like America. Like it's stuck with me. Okay, well, you know what? And I don't know if I'm cutting this part out too. Part of my podcast is I'll cut something out, and I don't cut anything out. So this will be just a fun episode. I did want to ask you to kind of timestamp a
Mhm.
little bit. Maybe got about 30 minutes left. I was thinking about we kind of ask some fun questions. I know you have your
Mhm.
kind of your course to plug. Is there anything you felt like you either didn't get a chance to share or like you want to share more of before this
I
episode?
think I think maybe talking about how you get somebody to actually change their lifestyle when they're in a bad place,
I
like
love
the
that.
process of that,
Okay.
like getting into some of the, like actually what I do, helping people as opposed to talking about hot political topics.
No, no, no. We'll do that. And then I'm gonna probably ask you some fun, easy questions at the very, very end. Well, sorry. We'll
Sure.
do that. I'll have you plug your socials. Fun little easy conversation, and I'm gonna say
Yeah.
goodbye to you. Okay?
Okay. Cool.
Excellent. So you were kind of touching on a lot about like again the steps you took, and you did mention
Mhm.
your coach though. So what exactly do you do to kind of help other people change their lifestyles, to kind of change their
Right.
personage?
Well, most of the people that come to me are in a bad place. They're not either happy with their body composition or they've got a health issue. And so we look at like their overall lifestyle, what they're doing. We're looking for low hanging fruit. So we talk about, okay, what is your number one concern? If it's like, I've got an autoimmune condition or I've gained some weight, we start looking at, okay, what are the things that in your life, say you're a night shift worker or, say I have a woman that comes to me that can't lose body fat. The first thing I'm going to ask her, are you on birth control? Because
Hmm.
if she's on birth control, it's going to be very difficult for her to lose body fat. Okay.
Okay.
Or do you have a gallbladder? Someone's missing a gallbladder, their digestion is going to be off. So there's things we can do to help with that. But I'm going to look for the low hanging fruit. Are you getting your sleep? Are you eating a protein at every meal? Are you getting outside multiple times a day? What kind of water are you drinking? We look at all these things and then we basically come up with a plan. A lot of the people that I attract are people that have exercised too much or they've worked too much and they've burnt themselves out. They're in a bad place. And we have to start with self-care. We have to, I usually have to talk with women in particular.
Hmm.
You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on somebody else. And a lot of people, particularly women, are taking care of everyone else but themselves. And so
Yeah.
we start with little habits like, okay, you're in front of a screen from, 9 in the morning till 7, 8 o'clock at night, and you go home, you take care of your kids, you go to bed exhausted, you get up and do it again. Can we take 10 minutes after breakfast and go for a walk? Can we take 10 minutes after lunch and go for a walk?
Little
Can we go
things.
for a walk in the evening? Little things, starting with that. Are you getting a protein at every meal? Things like that. We start with little things like that. Getting the lights off at night, making sure you're not having screens on at night. Getting people to slow down enough where they can actually look at themselves and see that maybe there's some things like me where I had to look at myself and realize that I needed to make some changes on myself. Blamed other people. For some of my struggles, I blame other people or other circumstances, and I realized that there was a lot of work I needed to do on myself in order for me to get better. And so, that's a lot of what I do at Stillman Wellness or in the medical practice at Stillman MD. It's giving people, a lot of people will, New Year's resolution, they'll start off with like hard charging the first week. They'll do this crazy exercise program and then it falls off the next week. But we try to just add little habits and we want to make it so that people fall in love with, okay, they want to lose a certain amount of weight or they want to look a certain way.
Right.
Okay, you know, what do we have to do to basically go in that direction and not focus on the outcome, not focus on the illness, focus on the wellness
Okay.
and give them things that they can do every single day that are going to take them towards their goal. and not to be goal focused, but to be process focused, to fall in love with, I'm going to treat myself well. I'm going to get outside every day because it makes me feel better. I'm going to eat a protein every day. It makes me feel better. It helps me build muscle mass. My goal is to end up with better body composition, but I'm
Okay.
really going to do these things every day instead of like obsessing and getting on the scale every day. And a lot of people get frustrated if they don't see immediate results. We really want people to fall in love with the process and not obsess over the outcome, so to speak.
It's the destination versus, I mean, the destination versus the journey. But like I said, you're trying to
Right,
make it's like, hey, let's make the journey a process that you're going to keep doing. So it's like, oh man,
right.
this is just fun. I feel great. This is well, okay. You know what?
Yeah,
Let's do me then.
yeah,
Well, I have two questions. Okay, we can either do me
sure. Hmm.
or my question is kind of more about the mental health. When do you notice that maybe someone's issues, it's like, hey, it's just a lot of your issues is that just there's a mental blocker, there's something going on there that you can't move away from.
Well, we deal with that a lot when people have like autoimmune disease or Lyme disease or whatever. Their sickness becomes their identity, right? So we were like, hey, don't focus on your illness, focus on the things you need to do to get well, right? So
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. And a lot of people, I just think because people live an indoor life, their overall mental health is just not good. You know, you can people when people go out in nature, they automatically calm down. They automatically relax. There's studies that show that if you put a picture of nature in your office, it has a calming effect, right?
Ooh.
So,
Oh,
getting people
cool.
outside, getting people off screens, getting people sleeping well, these are all things that contribute to, better mental health. They're able to make better choices. I compare modern life to getting in your car, starting it up, and revving the shit out of the engine and never driving anywhere.
Mhm.
And then people are exhausted. They don't feel good. So then they drink alcohol. They eat, sugary foods. They're sleep deprived, and then they just medicate themselves. And so, my job as a coach is to give them strategies to help break that cycle,
Mhm.
so that they don't, drive off the road. And telling people too, like, you're going to see some progress, then you're going to level out. Maybe you'll regress a little bit, then you're going to see some progress. This is not a straight line thing. It's going to be up and down, and you just do the best you can. Most people are going to do much better if they get an 80-20 thing going. But I really, really focus on the mindset, really focus on giving people things that are actionable and things they can do to build habits and things that are sustainable that they can
Yeah.
do for the rest of their life. And then
So,
also, are their goals realistic?
hmm.
Do they have a goal that's just like the amount of effort that's going to go into it just isn't worth it, right? So
Yeah.
educating people on that as well.
Okay. Well, like let's ask me. Okay. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm gonna see how much exactly I want to share. So, I mean, this year's been particularly difficult. We had, besides just multiple friends of ours who passed away, had a pet die, marriage issues.
Yeah,
Uh, So as far as like that would go, I mean, where would you start? Okay, so that's all my backstory. I
yeah,
struggle with depression and
hmm,
motivation as well. The downside
yeah,
is I am in Oregon. There's not a lot of
yes,
sunlight,
yes.
and I have an issue with my weight. Where do we go from here?
Hmm. Well, the first thing I would do is say, okay, you need to get out as much as you can, even though you're in Oregon. You need to get out in the mornings. I mean, your skin is very, very pale, so you don't get a lot of sun. That would be the first step. And then we can look at things like a Spurdy vitamin D lamp to get you a little extra bright light. It's basically a tanning lamp. That's something that you can do throughout the day. We would look at things like sauna, getting in an infrared sauna to get you some heat, to give you
Hmm.
some red light.
Would that be before or after the workout?
Just in general throughout the day. I mean, you could
Okay.
start in the morning with it. You could the vitamin D lamp you probably want to do in the afternoon. So the biggest thing would be just getting out in nature and going for walks, even though the sun isn't ideal compared to other places in the country.
Yeah.
We would start with that. And then, we would look at like, are you taking time to relax? Are you taking, with the amount of stress you've been under and the traumatic events you've had, are you doing some sort of non-sleep deep rest or restorative yoga or Tai Chi type things to kind of calm your nervous system, help you relax?
Oh, exactly. Like, what am I doing? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that I would look at like, what are you doing to like just counteract the stress of life? Are you going out in nature? Are you sitting down on a park bench and just breathing through your nose and just relaxing, taking some time for that?
Okay.
And then we would look at like, making sure you're getting a protein in every meal. And we would just kind of go through the checklist and give you a few things that you could do consistently and do those for 4 to 6 weeks and then see what happens and see what improves and what doesn't. And then maybe give you a few other things and look
Well,
at what you're doing workout wise and things like that.
okay, let's talk about that. Okay, so what, and I'm sorry, it seems like I'm getting kind of like your course for free right now, but
No, I do this every day. I mean, I do lives all the time. I tell, there's no secrets. I tell people what we do. It's just people, like all the information's out there. The difference is when you sign up with a coaching program with us, you have somebody checking on you and holding you accountable. Like all the information's free on the internet. What you need to do, you may need to look in the right place, but it's no secret what needs to happen. It's just that, are you going to be able to do it? And is the person working with you going to be able to explain it in a way that's rational and sane and basically give you the tools and progress you at the right rate?
makes sense.
That's basically what it comes down to. Most people need somebody to keep them accountable. I had a gym for 20 years and I always thought, well, these people will just quit training with me. No, a lot of them knew as much about training as I did by the time I was done coaching them. They love the community. They love showing up. They love the guidance. They love the teaching. They love the fact that they had somebody like helping them with it and someone to hold them accountable. Half the clients I've talked about the same things with them because they'd be doing really well for a while. And then all of a sudden they come in, they like, oh, I gained some weight or my depression's back. And I'd be like, okay, so what happened? Well, I had a cousin die and I haven't been getting outside as much. I've been kind of depressed. I started drinking a little bit and it's affected my sleep and now I'm not feeling well. And it's like, okay, well, you know what you need to do. You need to go outside. You need to get outside more. You need to make a priority for that. You need to really watch your alcohol consumption, and so getting outside, getting in sunlight, getting in your sauna is going to help give you the light you need. So you're not going to feel like you need to medicate yourself. So a lot
Exactly.
of times the coaching part of it is all about keeping people accountable and providing them some guidance. People tend to do better when they know somebody's going to check on them.
Yeah,
So
no,
none of the
exactly.
information we have to share, I think what Dr. Stillman and I do is simplify it in a way that people really understand. And we eliminate a lot of the noise because there's so much information out there that we really break it down to the core fundamental things that people really need to do. And if you do our 5 fundamental habits, if you get outside 3 times a day, if you eat a protein at every meal, if you get the lights off at night, if you drink high quality water, preferably spring water, and you have a good social life in general, your health is going to be in a good place. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be perfect. We might need to do some other things to give you a little extra help. But generally speaking, if you do those 5 things, you're going to be better off than most people.
No, absolutely. Well, and I mean, I'm thinking about, okay, so this is what I essentially would want to do though. So I think I would want to go outside, make that a priority, of course, though. And I mean,
Mhm.
let's ask you this. So you were mentioning about as far as the gosh, what was it though? The things we could do, or like, hey, these are some I mean, what's some? I have a pull-up bar. I mean, well, I
Mhm.
guess I wouldn't mind working on upper arm strength. I wouldn't mind like doing more
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. I mean, any
Mhm.
suggestions there?
Well, I generally like to start people with very simple circuits just to build capacity. We start with walking. It
Hmm.
depends on the person. Like if I have somebody who can't walk, I'm going to give them totally different advice. Generally, I have some fairly simple circuits that I give people like bear crawls, medicine ball throws, just picking up a weight and carrying it, getting
Yeah.
people to mow the lawn. And then once we establish a little bit of a fitness base, then we start looking at, okay, what kind of equipment do you have? When I work with somebody who gets into something like pull-ups, I'll have them set the bar at their chin level and then have them lower themselves down and do a deep squat and use their legs to help assist them. Because a lot of
Okay.
people will just try and start jamming out pull-ups and it usually doesn't end well. We start with, making sure we can do a push-up well, making sure we can do all the basic fundamental things well. And then most people like, if I have to drive from Nicaragua to Nebraska, I can't start in Mexico. I have to start in Nicaragua.
No,
And
absolutely.
most people don't lower the activity or the lifestyle stuff to the level that they're at. They jump 4 or 5 steps. They go from not going outside at all to I'm going to cold plunge, I'm going to sauna, I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to do 75 things and go all out.
Jump right in, baby. Hell
Yeah,
yeah.
and some people can get away with that, but most people can't. Most people just need to work on one or two things at a time and use that to build momentum. It's kind of like the pebble in the pond. You throw the pebble in the pond and it ripples out. A lot of these habits have massive, massive payback, like dividend wise. Like you get a big amount of return for a little bit of work. And most people just do way too many things too fast, too much. And they don't really start simple enough or slow enough. And
Right.
then once they get going, they don't do a really good job of upping the ante at a significant pace to keep them progressing in the same at a good rate. You know.
That's and no, you ain't kidding. And I mean, because that's again, I'm trying to figure out like, how I can kind of not do that. I mean, I think the thing I've been slowly trying to do workout wise is we have stairs. I work in an office
Mm-hmm.
building. That's the
Yeah,
one thing I've been doing is like, okay, it helps me lose weight, it'll tone my legs. And is
yeah,
it like even almost I think I was reading something. I think it might even be better on your joints than running because you're at
yeah.
least
I'd
like,
say I'd say walking up and down stairs is going to be a little better than running itself, particularly running in a straight line.
yeah.
I mean, you have to figure out things that you like to do, but we also have to give you things that are at your level and things that you can actually adapt to. Your body's only good to the point of your ability to adapt to your training. So, and the nice thing
Mm,
about having a really low fitness level is it really doesn't take much to get better. So
okay.
a lot of people will do this big long, or they go to a trainer and the trainer just beats the crap out of them and they soar for 5 days and they never go back. Right. So, the first couple of times you work out, you should sweat a little bit. You want to move around. You want to kind of see how you're doing. And then you just slowly ramp it up from there. A lot of people bite off way too much, way more than they can chew at first.
Like I said, it's really very much a slow and steady wins the race kind of thing. It's like, hey, this needs to be like
Yeah.
a, well, I guess,
Yeah,
yeah. I'm trying to
it's
figure out how to
progressive
do
over time.
that with like the stairs as well, because that's another thing I'm
Yeah.
issuing is I'm climbing too much, and the next day I'm just like I can't walk. Ow, like
Yeah. Well, you start with, if you did, like, say you did that and, um, like 10 trips up the stairs made you feel like garbage, you cut it back to three,
mm,
and then you stick at three until you can do three without feeling no side effects. And then maybe you go to four.
no,
Then
that's a
maybe
good idea.
you climb stairs one day and you walk the next day, or you jog in a swimming pool the next day, because those have less impact than the stairs, right? And then say you do one day, you do 8 sets of stairs, and you feel pretty decent. It challenged you. If you want to do stairs the next day, maybe you do 4 sets instead of 8. Like you don't
Okay,
always have to
okay,
be constantly getting better, right? So you want to have some time when you push, and then have some time to just do active rest. So a lot of people will be like, well, I did, a lot of people think they need to feel pain or suffering in order to make improvement, and there is a time and place for that. But generally speaking,
I mean, consistency is
correct.
just the better options. It's like as long as you're just being consistent, that's way
If
better
you
because again,
can
just a
if you
full
can
force that
string
kind of
several
thing.
decent workouts together, it's much better than like destroying yourself and then being crap for 4 or 5 days.
What are some good again? Because I
Right.
don't have the gym, but what are some good home workouts I could do just like kind of to either alternate or every
If
other day to
you if
get
you look
like
at my YouTube channel and you type in feel good circuit, you just type in Jim Laird feel good circuit,
okay,
it's going to come up with a lot of stuff where
yeah.
you're rolling around on the ground, you're doing bear crawls, you're doing a lot of floor stuff. I mean, you can do wall sits, you can do bear crawl holds, you can do carry. If you have a dumbbell, you can just pick
Hell
it up and
yeah.
carry it. Mowing the grass, I think, is one of the most overlooked things that people have eliminated from their lives. They're paying people to do it for you. So, I mean, there's unlimited things you can do with medicine balls. There's tons of things you can do with your your body itself. So you just start where you are and you challenge yourself. There's some great Tai Chi workouts online. I like combining Tai Chi with strength training because Tai Chi is really flowing. And strength training is more about creating
Mhm.
force.
Well, I want to give you some views though. So I'm guys, and this is if you're mildly interested in maybe helping me with this again, not this destination, but this weight loss journey, not even like just a lifestyle
Sure.
journey. I'll post some videos in the group page on Facebook, and yeah, I mean, yeah, let's do some just some positive things for our body. I don't know about you, but unfortunately, I am a desk warrior. I don't go out enough. I am pale. It's like Your boy has all the makings of greatness. It's just we need.
I mean, a really simple thing to do is like every 45 minutes or so is just get up and, like really simple, just like do cross connects. You just stuff like that, or
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know, sit down in a deep squat for a while. Just anything you can do, to get moving. Every 45 minutes or so, just get up and move around. That's some really simple stuff you can
Okay.
do. And there's all sorts of stuff you can do, like grabbing your knees on the floor and rocking back and forth. It's just unlimited.
I used to also do yoga too. Yoga was
Yeah,
helpful when I was
yoga
doing
can
it
be
though.
helpful. It
But
it
again,
it 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 depends on the person. It depends on the coach. A lot of people,
yeah.
yoga is actually traditionally a meditation. We've kind of turned it into exercise in the West, and a lot of people will basically it'll turn into a bending pretzel competition, and that doesn't really necessarily
Mm.
end well for some people. So,
No, absolutely. Some people say, bro, like, hey, you're just not that flexible. I don't know
right,
what to tell
right.
you. Just it's not happening for you, brother. Well, no, hey, I mean, I got your YouTube here. I'll post some videos to let everyone else, if they're mildly interested, to
Thank
check
you.
that out as well. And I mean, no, hey, if anything, I'm be more excited if we stay in
Yeah,
contact and you can see like a little
there you
before and
go.
after. And I'm like, hey, it's you didn't even get any of my depression too. It's like, just all this is all just friendly conversation. So it's great.
Well, exercise definitely helps with depression. Getting outside helps with depression. I'd get yourself a Spurdy vitamin D lamp. I'd start sitting in front of that like 5 minutes a day. That'll make you feel a lot better, particularly in the wintertime when you get that seasonal affective disorder.
Oh, dude, it's so real.
That bright light will help immensely, and so will the sauna as well.
Well, do you have like a light you recommend or anything like on like Amazon? You're like, hey, you
Look
should
look
check
up
this out.
Spurdy vitamin D lamp.
How do you spell Spurdy? Is it like with a URTY or with a ERDY?
If you type in Dr. Stillman and Spurdy, type in Dr. Stillman and vitamin D lamp or Spurdy, it'll pull up
Okay, here
his
we go.
Substack. You'll actually get a discount code. So
Damn.
they're not cheap, but they're
Hmm.
well worth it.
No, they are not.
They are
Okay.
well worth it.
$600. Okay. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, if I intend to stay here, like,
There's a thing called a happy light, but it doesn't have the right frequency for you to make vitamin D, and that's really, really important. And then the more morning sun, a lot of people go wrong with the sun is they start off with like you're really pale, and they start going out like in the heat of the afternoon. In Oregon, you really don't have to worry that much, but the morning light is what builds your solar callus. The morning and the evening light is what basically allows you to tan. So the morning light prepares you for the afternoon sun. And that's why so many people in America get in trouble with the sun, is they basically never spend any time outside, and then they go out in the heat of the
mm.
afternoon and bake like a potato. So
You sunscreen at all? Like you at least like, try to keep your
no,
again,
never.
because I mean, I was always mildly curious about skin cancer is never something you're worried about.
If you look at the research, indoor workers have a much higher rate of skin cancer than outdoor workers. If you look at Britain and places like Britain who have like basically told people to put sunscreen on in their house and avoid being outside,
Mhm.
as people have moved outside, the skin cancer rates have gotten worse.
You heard it here, folks. You'll get skin cancer if you stay inside. So go outside. We're also not a medical doctor. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I know, bad joke, but
I'm just
it,
pointing out some research that most people aren't aware of. And I mean, we've evolved with the sun for however long you believe we've been here. I believe the reason why people are having so many skin issues is because they just aren't getting outside.
I mean, I don't think the pandemic or COVID helped with that either. When they were just like, you will go
Well, yeah,
inside. Like
yeah.
yeah.
And look at the
Well,
people that had the worst outcomes in that were people that have low vitamin D level. Here's the argument with skin cancer. So I'm obviously not an MD, but I hang out with one, and I've done a lot of reading. So you know how many people approximately die of skin cancer in the U.S. every year?
I don't actually, so hit me with
I
it.
think it's around 10,000. How many people die
Okay.
of vitamin D deficiency diseases every year in the United States?
I do not
It's
know as well.
heart disease,
All right.
cancer, every disease, diabetes is all vitamin D related deficiencies. So we got millions and
Hmm.
millions and millions of people
everyone or some of them, or at least like, vitamin D would definitely have
Vitamin
like a
D, like
kind of a
just about,
stake, and
I
that
would
would
say
help
just about
that
everyone
thing.
that has diabetes has, an autoimmune disease usually has a vitamin D deficiency. So it's a massive
Okay.
part of health. Just type in circadian rhythm and cancer and look at the research that comes up. So
No, I got some research. I definitely think I could check some stuff out here, see kind of what is ideally the best
yeah,
thing, for the human health, because you guys take care of it. I think that's the important thing is you just gotta take care of yourself, plain and
yes.
simple.
Well, and unfortunately, our modern life does everything. Everything in our modern life pretty pulls us away from things that make us essentially healthy. If you look at pictures from the 60s and 70s of people on the beach, there were no obese people at all, zero. And
Oh
they
God, yeah,
lived they
no,
lived
it's
essentially more of an outdoor life. They ate less processed food. They made most of their food themselves. They did low level manual labor, and then that all changed as we've got sucked indoors and less manual labor and more processed foods and easier accessible foods. I mean, you don't even have to leave your house anymore. Somebody from Uber Eats will deliver food to your
exactly,
door. So as the foods have gotten more
exactly.
tasty, see, we're people don't understand we're designed to eat as much as possible and to move as little as possible. Because 100 years ago, you had to move a lot because you had to build your shelter, you had to get firewood. Like in Nicaragua, where I live, people have chickens, they have cows,
Yeah,
they're cutting vegetation in the yard with a machete all day. They're gathering wood, they're building their shelters, they're not sitting inside all day, they're very active. um yeah, they're
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 doing
not sitting
something
around in air
exactly.
conditioning all day. So once you become an indoor creature, just like if you look up, like there's actually on my link tree, there's a link called Animal Madness, and it talks about what happens to animals when you put them in the zoo. When animals are put into a zoo, they stop
Hmm.
reproducing. They go nuts. They're
Okay.
usually on antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, because they usually start, like doing really obsessive behavior, like chewing their feet off or doing really, really crazy
Oh
stuff, right?
Jesus.
So you've taken them out of their natural wild environment and you put them into an artificial environment. And I would argue the humans are the same
Hmm.
way. Humans are designed to be in nature. They're designed to be in contact with light, natural light, and we've basically turned humans into zoo animals essentially. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing so many issues, especially in places like India, where they've gone from living a more outdoor life to now all of a sudden, Google moved into India and they've got a bunch of tech centers over there. And all of a sudden they've got really high diabetes rates, which traditionally they didn't have in the past. So, um,
Man.
as people move indoors, the Western diseases tend to come with them.
Trying to think about what I want to title this episode. Usually it's something like what the person says, but I'm thinking either go outside or touch grass, or
Yeah,
maybe maybe I could do a clickbait title like if you stay inside you'll get cancer.
that's up to
I
you.
don't,
But
I
I
don't know.
mean, I mean,
I know it's
if you look at the research on, like, if you just type in like nature and depression or nature and anxiety, they've got studies that show that pictures of nature actually reduce anxiety. And
oh, I believe that too. Because I mean I will say despite like it being so gray here, is that I do live in a very
yes,
have you been to
I
Oregon?
actually almost got thrown in jail in Oregon. I was driving from Redding, California, back home to Canada, and I didn't understand that you weren't allowed to fill your own gas up in Oregon. And so yeah,
They really they've I don't want to necessarily say appealed it, but they altered it where like some gas
yeah, yeah.
stations you can or they don't
Which is
care if
fine.
you do
I've
it. Like
actually gotten
that's
gotten to actually like that, because everywhere down here they fill up the gas for you. So I'm totally fine with that now.
oh it's lovely. No, I love it because I'm actually I don't know if I told you I'm from California. I'm actually from California, so like it's like I know exactly what you're talking about. Like I lived in
Yeah,
Sacramento actually,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
know Reading, I know all
I
those
lived in
locations,
I lived in
and
Reading, played football there for 1 year, and then I went to Virginia.
yeah, there you go. It's but yeah, no, it's there is something about pumping your own gas to just like it's we don't have a lot of luxuries here, but it's just kind of like like
I also had a really fancy classic car at the
fancy.
time too, and I didn't want anybody touching it. So, yeah.
Smart, smart. Well, hey, you know what? I mean, hey, you got any links or stuff to send my
Yeah,
way? You got my number
yeah,
technically. I would love to
sure.
stay in chat. I mean, speaking of staying in chat, I mean, if anybody hypothetically wanted to go either on a journey, whether they were
Hmm.
interested in coaching, they said you said something where like, I like this guy, I could use some help from him. How can they contact you? How can they get
Well, you
into
can
your
just go to
services?
stillmanwellness.com and just get on our email list. You can join our membership. We have a membership that's essentially $1 a day that gives you access to all our webinars we do on Thursdays. You basically can get, we do a free
Okay.
webinar we do a live every Monday on YouTube, Instagram. You can message me on Instagram at Jim Laird, GYM. I named my gym after myself, GYM. My name is Jim, but I just
There you go.
Laird is my Instagram.
Jim
Don't
Zoom.
ever name a gym after yourself. When you go to sell it, it doesn't end well. Yeah,
That's super
so
funny. Oh my
so they
God.
can contact me on Instagram, but if you go to Stillman Wellness, you can get on the email list. Every Wednesday night we send out a registration link for our webinar. All those former webinars are basically recorded and put in the membership, so you can get in a membership. Membership gives you a coaching call with Dr. Stillman and myself, a group coaching call. It gives you a 15-minute onboarding call with me, and then it gives you an additional coaching call with myself. And then if you buy the basically the monthly subscription, which you can cancel at any time, you can
Mhm.
upgrade to a more advanced coaching program where you get an hour onboarding call with me, and you get essentially, I think, up to 8 group coaching calls with myself, and then 2 of them were with Dr. Stillman.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's a
so it's like,
lot. It's a lot of dollar. That's a
yeah,
big
it's
dollar
like
value for anyone
that's
interested, though.
$99, and we have a bunch of courses in there with that as well. And then the medical side, you can go to Stillman Wellness or stillmanmd.com. But in order to work in the medical side, you have to either be in Florida or New York, or you have to see Dr. Stillman in Florida. But you can apply to be a patient over there at
Mhm.
Stillman MD. But that's basically the way to get a hold of me. You can also check out my encouraging humans to get outside website, which is nikabarbell.com, which where I'm raising my money to build an outdoor gym, also for some local charities here that I support, or not here. I'm in Panama right now, but I support a couple Nicaraguan charities
Nice.
and a bunch of animals and stuff. So any proceeds from the t-shirt sales that remind people to get outside go towards animals, charities, and my outdoor gym. So all sorts of cool clothing on there with, don't be a zoo animal, get outside, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
There you go. Well, you hear it here, folks. And again, same as before, we'll always provide links in the description. So, I mean, if you're interested, you want to check this out, though, again, we'll make sure we post it for our friend Jim here. Well, hey, no, seriously, this was a pleasure. I mean, again, I had some just conversations I don't normally have, and kind of made me think about some things I don't normally think. And I think that's the important thing. I think again, those need to happen
Yeah.
to people to kind
And,
of,
and that's really
I
my
don't know.
goal. My goal is not really to like change anybody's mind or to like indoctrinate anyone. My goal is just to get people to think about things in a different way. And that's really when I talk to people. I really want people to think and come up with their own opinion. And I love it when people challenge my opinion. I love it when I have intense discussions with people, as long as it doesn't become personal. Like I never go personal. I never attack a person personally. I stick to the issues. I stick to what I think is right.
That's what we're talking about. That's facts versus feelings, my guy. Exactly.
That's right. So it's never we're arguing and we disagree. It never turns into, well, you're a terrible person, which is where it goes today, which is unfortunate because there's plenty of people that I don't agree with that I'm really good friends with that have the total opposite viewpoint that I do. And I'm totally fine with that. I love opposite viewpoints. I study both sides of an issue. I think if you are a true, I don't know if I call myself a savant, but I try to know both sides of the argument and I try to be able to argue both sides of the argument. I want to know both sides. So I constantly do that,
Hey,
whether it's history or whatever it is. I'm always looking at both sides to kind of figure out more or less what I think is the truth is usually somewhere in the middle.
just it really, you don't look like a dumbass. I mean, like, there's just
well,
something about like bringing something to it where you're just like,
Well, I've
hey,
made a
I'm
lot of
not.
mistakes, and that's where, like I've just made a lot of mistakes. I mean, that's how you learn, and I've made a lot of them.
I think final thing I want to drop with, of course, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. As far as the final thing to kind of end, I think we're approaching our
Mhm.
final rep
Sure,
here. Kind of arm pinching a little bit. We're gonna get a protein
sure.
shake or something. But we started with you moving. You're
Hmm.
now in
Hmm.
Panama currently. Any advice for just like just for people how to not be a tourist, how not just be
Yes,
obnoxious
yes.
American.
Okay. So one, just say hi to people. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Like just be nice, smile, understand that people
Okay.
that people
Nice. Say
here
hi.
have a different culture, a different way of life. I didn't speak Spanish. I drove all the way from Florida to Nicaragua, and I was treated more or less. I had a couple of little incidents, but I've never had a problem where I was treated poorly because people had said to me, "You're the nicest gringo I've ever met," because I treated people with respect. I treated
Hey.
people with respect until they gave me a reason not to. And I roll with the
Hmm.
punches too. Like I'm in another culture, I'm in someone else's country. Like, I've had people here, in Nicaragua that are like, well, I have rights here. And I'm like, this is a different country. It's not like the US. You've got to adhere to the customs here. You don't have the same rights you do in the US. You have to understand that. And then just respecting the culture,
Exactly.
respecting the community, not walking around like a big shot. Like, don't be a loud, obnoxious person. Be kind.
Yeah.
Just when you're nice. I've traveled all over the world and I've been to some really interesting places, and the people themselves are generally good people. It's usually the governments that are a little wacky. But Nicaragua, the people are wonderful. Depending on where you go in the US could be very dangerous or it can be ultra safe and cool. And it's the same way in Nicaragua, although Nicaragua is one of the safer countries in the world now. Same with El Salvador. But if you treat people well,
Mhm.
if you're kind, if you make an effort to just learn a little bit of Spanish, it goes a long way. People will come up and talk to you. Take the time to talk to them. Be honest that you don't speak Spanish. Use Google Translate. Just to chat a little bit, and people will generally treat you very well. Get to know some of the locals. Don't just if you come down here, like you come down to Nicaragua, just don't live in a gated community and never go out with the community. Get to know the locals, get to know the people, and you'll have a
Right.
much better experience.
Okay. So I like it. So be kind, say hi. I mean, I think it's just one thing is like maybe try to learn the language. I mean, anyone can learn hi. How's it going? Where's the bathroom?
Just treat others the way you'd want to be treated, and everything's going to be fine. It's not rocket
There you
science.
go. Well, okay. Well, I mean, hey, there you go. So, I mean, don't be a
Yeah,
gringo.
just don't. Yeah,
Respect the customs. Be nice. Learn a
yeah.
language. I think these are all real just fantastic
Smile, be
lessons to
pleasant.
learn.
It's not that complicated.
That'll be pleasant. Okay. Well, hey, I think we got some solid advice here for the gringos that listen to this. Not all gringos, got a good grab bag, but
Sure,
got some
sure,
gringos too. I just
sure,
like saying
sure.
gringo. It's fun. Gringo. Well, okay. Hey, no, seriously, this is was fun. Think you were my first, I would say, kind of wellness fitness person I've had on here though, and I respect what you do. I really hope that you can kind of keep being that positive influence
Mhm.
to people. And I don't know, the only thing I'd say is just keep doing what you're doing as far as like keep learning both sides of the
Mhm.
discussion. I think things will unfortunately get more complicated as they progress. And again, I think it's better to make a point when you know both sides rather than
Correct.
just say what Fox News or
That's
Facebook
that's
says.
correct. That's
Is
correct. Well,
saying. Which, by the way, I'm guilty of. I hate when I see like a mild title. I'm like, oh, hey, did you know this thing? Just again, not even remotely check. Just
yeah,
assume it's
yeah.
fact, and then to find out, oh my God, I've been spreading lies for like months.
Well,
Like,
and
whoops,
unfortunately,
whoopsie.
with a lot of the information that's come out the last couple of years, there's a lot of people that, a lot of the narratives that we've been told with history and with everything else have turned out not to be exactly accurate.
You know what? I think I know what I'm gonna end on. Because like, I gotta recommend something to watch. Do you this is the nerdiest thing I'm gonna ask you. Do you anime at all?
No,
Like
no, no,
you don't? Dragon Ball's never come up in your line of work. No one's ever.
no. I watch. No, no. We generally deal with, for the most part, a little middle age. I've got some young kids that I trained over the years, but no, I'm a history dude. I love watching
Okay.
history shows, that sort of thing. I love that kind of stuff, like Hunt for Red October, Blast the Mohicans, stuff like
Solid
that.
flick.
So
Solid flick. There's I got on the chopping block. I haven't seen the Lincoln biopic with Daniel Day-Lewis. You seen
yes,
that one? solid,
Yeah,
like just
anything
really like,
Daniel Day-Lewis does is incredible. He's one of the best. He's one of the.
oh my
I
god,
think he's one of the most underrated actors ever.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's well, the reason I mentioned anime, not necessarily because of
Mhm.
Dragon Ball. That's funny that like that was the case. Have you ever heard of Baki
No.
though? It's okay. I'm trying to describe to someone who have no idea about it though, but essentially it's an anime about a child
Hmm.
fighter who's just he's got to be on performance
Yeah.
enhancing drugs because like everyone is disgustingly shredded. I mean, just covered in
Yeah. Yeah.
muscles
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and
Well, and then that's the funny thing about steroids, right? Is like they say they're bad, but all the comic book heroes look like they're on them. I mean, look at Captain America. Captain America. That's basically steroids right there. Like this little.
literally they gave
Yeah.
him a super
Exactly.
serum. Like
Exactly. So.
we put some science into his body and he's able to do all this shit. And oh man.
Yeah, I know yeah. So it's all of our comic book heroes, all of this stuff are all amped and juiced, and then don't do that because it's bad. It's just really weird.
Well, if you're mildly interested, it's essentially like a little show where it's like they fight, but again, it's like they all use science, but they
Hmm.
kind of like describe, oh hey, I kicked your head off essentially, and here's how with the right velocity
Right.
and shoe type that could make it a thing. But it's just blown up to the proportion of like the 20s. We're like, bro, what the hell? Like this, there's a man in a wheelchair who somehow insanely strong does a backflip in the wheelchair. It just is it's silly. If you're like, yeah, I got a minute, I got
Sure.
20 minutes, I'll send it your way.
Okay.
Check it out.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. I've been Tristan. This has been Jim. This has been another ordinary person with an extraordinary story. Go outside. I'm gonna do that. I'm literally gonna finish this. I'm gonna go walk around and get some vitamin D. Go outside. Would you
Yes.
say that, Jim? Just go outside.
Don't forget to get
Go
outside.
outside.
That's what we always say.
And drink
Yeah.
water. Drink water. That was the other thing you said in your YouTube video that made me like, okay, I like this guy, was because I know so many people were like, I have a headache. I feel like shit. I didn't drink any water today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, try. Just try that. Try to do the thing your
Yeah.
body feels.
Spring water is the
Drink
best if you
water.
can pull that off.
There you go. Okay. This episode's brought to you by Spring Water. Drink that
There
shit.
you go.
All right. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. Take it easy. Thank you for listening to another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. If you're interested in helping the channel, feel free to click on the link below to get access to our Patreon, where we have exclusive episodes and clips not shown to the public. And of course, if you believe you yourself have an interesting story to tell, or know somebody who would be great for the show, feel free to email me back at OPESpodcast@gmail.com. That's OPES. That's the acronym for the show, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories, OPES, podcast@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, and until next time.